Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Judy Browse. I'm the Executive Director of NAAEE, the North American Association for Environmental Education, and we really are thrilled that you could join us today. This is our first webinar of the year. Last year, we did about 24 webinars. This year, we're going to try and do a lot of webinars as well, because we have heard from all of you that they're really helpful and that you really like learning about new things, new ideas. This is part 2 of talking about the stories that we tell. And today we're going to talk about, again, reflective writing, but also thinking about understanding place and equity. And really excited to have this part 2 because part 1 was so wonderful. And today, thinking about place and equity and the possibilities in exploring what is nearby in our lives. And we do have a wonderful presenter today. And if you were on the first one, you know Naamal. And I'll introduce her more formally in just a minute, but just a wealth of ideas and creativity. And if you did miss part 1, you can still listen to part 1. It's fine if you weren't here last time, but part 1 was all about thinking about nature, diversity, and place and how that influences our teaching and learning. So really excited to be able to have part 2. And if you just go to EE Pro, you can listen to the recording and you can listen to all the recordings of our webinars. And for those of you who are new to NAAEE, these webinars are an opportunity to bring new ideas and insights to our field. We are so excited about our partners, which I'll introduce in a minute. And it's an opportunity for us to think about how do we expand our field? How do we center equity in everything that we're doing? How do we address some of the current issues that are taking place? We're in a really difficult time globally, and how can we use these webinars to help inform us and support us? So we would love for you to enter in any ideas in the chat you have for future webinars, and we'll be sending out a more formal survey, and Ann will talk more about that, to get your ideas of what webinars would be most useful to you. If you do have ideas for speakers, let us know that. We'd love to hear from you. So just feel free to enter them into the chat at any point. And I do want to thank the Forest Service so much. We've had this great partnership, as many of you know, with the U.S. Forest Service. And this is one of our eeINSPIRE webinars where together we are trying to help promote strengthening the field in environmental education, providing for professional development to the NAAEE family, the Forest Service family, and all of those who are working in related fields. And I just want to thank Rachel Bayer, who is our partner in crime at the Forest Service and working with us on the webinar series. And we're so excited Rachel could be with us today. So thank you, Rachel, for being here and for all you do. Long history of working in environmental education, and we're just so lucky to work with you. I also want to thank all our affiliate co-hosts who are part of our family. They work at the state, provincial, and regional level to support environmental education. And if you don't know much about your affiliates, we encourage you to find out and join and be part of what's happening at the state and regional and provincial level. And then I also want to thank EPA and E360 for helping to make this webinar series possible and allows us to be able to bring exciting speakers like the speaker we have today to all of you. I know so many of you know how to work with Zoom, but just know you're all muted and you can talk to us at any time through the chat, but just know that you can either hit all panelists that comes to everybody that has their video on right now and we can see that, or you can send a note to everyone. So feel free to send us notes. Please feel free to enter resources into the chat, ideas, writing, anything that you want to share, because we will save that chat. And it's a really great opportunity to have kind of a discussion with everybody else that's on the webinar with you. So this is really exciting. And thanks to Karen for doing live captioning, that anyone who needs help with the audio, and just remember you'll get a copy of the slides, the chat, the captioning, so that if you want to go back and listen to some pieces of it, you can do that. And I want to thank Ann for her leadership in supporting the whole webinar series, all the work that she does to make this work and to help get things lined up and organized and all of that. Just fantastic. And if you do have any specific issues or you're having trouble at all, email Ann or myself in the chat and we can try and help you while Naamal is speaking. So now it gives me a great honor to introduce our speaker today, because you are going to really love this. And if you weren't on part one, you're really in for a treat. And if you were on part one, you're going to really love to continue this conversation. So Naamal has worked for the environment for more than 2 decades. She works in the areas of inclusion, in conservation, and in education to solve problems related to vision, to strategy, to how to set priorities, and how to create change in your organization and actually in the world. She is the founder of MELA, which supports the people who protect nature. And she does this through consulting, through workshops, through mentoring and storytelling. And she leads efforts to support the connection between people, perspectives, equity, and places. She's just an amazing storyteller and a really creative energy. And I just want to say that she works with so many different groups and brings that expertise to all of us. And she works with everyone from the American Bird Conservancy to the firm Burnuth and Williamson. She helps nonprofits and foundations and corporations with their strategies and how they can do more. And as you can see from this list, an incredible background. She's got, a master's degree from Yale. She's got a doctorate from GW, and really brings so much expertise and talent to everything that we're doing. So we are thrilled to have you on board here, Naamal, and I'm going to turn it over to you to take us to the next step. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Judy. And thank you, Anne and Rachel and Karen, for making this webinar possible. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. And we'll dive right in. As we begin, I would love for you to keep typing in things that come up into the chat. I'm going to talk for a while. I'll share a few ideas, a little bit of my writing and a little bit of my thinking around these topics. And then at the end, we'll have time, or not at the end, in the middle, we'll have about 15 minutes to do some writing of your own. So make sure you have a notebook, a journal, a piece of paper, something to write on. And we'll do that writing together, even though we're all so far apart. Happy New Year, welcome. It's a crazy time. It's an intense time in so many parts of the world, but it's nice to have a little time to pause and to reflect together. I will stop along the way as well to ask you a few questions, a few things. And just to get us started, let's think, in the first one, I had everyone think about nature, but this time I'm broadening that out. I'm wanting you to think about place. And my favorite definition of place comes from Yi-Fu Tuan, a geographer who defines place as space imbued with meaning. And so place can be anything. It can be somewhere in nature, it can be a building, it can be a home of some sort. So imagine a place, and then in the chat, it would be great if we could see some of what people are writing. Find the chat, sorry. A place from your childhood, a place that's been a refuge in difficult times, a place from that's been a place that brought you joy during the pandemic. So imagine it in as much detail as you can. If you'd like, share a description or just what it is in the chat. And I'm reading the creek where I grew up, a local urban forest, a specific bayou in Louisiana, below the ocean waves. That's one of my favorites too. Tidal zone, my front porch, my Nana's house. some of the places that you all are describing are just awe-inspiring, natural, wild places. And some seem to be places that are imbued with emotion, that have, and probably all of them have memories layered, one on top of another from the times that you've been in those places. And that is really wonderful. Keep thinking about those places because that will form the basis of what we're talking about today. I will share with you one place that I wrote about. And this is what I wrote in preparing for this webinar. I'll read it. Small cushions of moss grow between the brick pathway of the tiny garden in front of my house. I love the velvety softness beneath my fingers. Drops of rain glisten, captured and displayed by tiny leaves. I transplant what the ants dig up. Over a decade, the moss has slowly covered more and more of the brick, creating rooms and passageways, miniature worlds within. I worry less when my thoughts are captured by such small marvels. And this is a time of worry for a lot of us. And for me, at least, focusing in on something small and specific can be really helpful. And that's one part of what I'm going to talk about today is some ideas related to moss from this book, Gathering Moss by Robin Wald Kimmerer. Dr. Kimmerer describes herself as a mother, professor, scientist, and member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. Her books weave together scientific, personal, and Indigenous understandings of nature. They also pay close attention to place, whether her cabin on Cranberry Lake at a biological station or a small cave covered in an unusual glittering moss. She helps us see. And that, I think, gets to the crux of what I want to talk about today, ways of seeing how deeply we are able to see what we see and what remains invisible. When we think about places and also when we think about equity, what appears to be invisible is often just as important as what's obviously glaringly in front of our faces. And I like thinking about moss because moss is so small, it's so easy to miss and yet so wondrous. Here are some of her words about this idea of seeing. With sophisticated technology, we strive to see what is beyond us, but are often blind to the myriad sparkling facets that lie so close at hand. We think we're seeing when we've only scratched the surface. Our acuity at this middle scale seems diminished, not by any failing of the eyes, but by the willingness of the mind. Has the power of our devices led us to distrust our unaided eyes? Or have we become dismissive of what takes no technology but only time and patience to perceive? Attentiveness alone can rival the most powerful magnifying lens. And it's this idea of magnification or attention that I would love for us to talk about. This book, Gathering Moss, is Robin Wald Kimmerer's first one. And a lot of what she talks about and writes about in the book takes place in the Adirondacks. And I was lucky enough to go there for a couple of weeks over the summer. We went to and stayed in a small cabin and had some time, my husband and daughter and I, by ourselves, as we have been for much of this year, but also in a new place. And we were so grateful to be surrounded by trees, to have access to water nearby. And I took this book with me, and I tried to read. I read some of it. I would have liked to have had time to read more of it. But it was really inspiring to be among the mosses that she studies. I wanted to take a little bit more inspiration from her words and then talk about a few other ideas as well. At the end of her book, she talks about this one specific type of moss. I think it's pronounced schistostega. I could be wrong. The common name is goblin's gold. And she talks about being at the biological field station, where she goes every summer to do research, and she'd gone there with her daughters. And she was looking at this bank that had been eroding away, and in the process of erosion, these caves had emerged along the sandy bank. And what she describes is one of these small caves. She says, here on the shadowy edge of where green life seems barely possible, schistostega has all it needs. Rain on the outside, fire on the inside. I feel a kinship with this being whose cold light is so different from my own. It asks very little from the world and yet glitters in response. I have been blessed by the companionship of good teachers, and I count schistostega among them. My small daughter blows at the roots dangling in front of her face. She looks like a goblin herself, crouched in the darkness, guarding the gold. Outside, the sun drops lower. A wide ribbon of orange light unrolls over the lake towards us. The sun is just a degree or two above the horizon now, its rim barely touching the hills on the opposite shore, sinking. The time is almost here. We're both holding our breath as the light starts to climb the walls of the cave. At last, the sun drops low enough to reach the opening in the bank. Timing is everything. Just for a moment, in the pause before the earth rotates us again into the night, the cave is flooded with light. The near nothingness of schistostega erupts in a shower of sparkles, like green glitter spilled on the rug at Christmas. Each cell of the protonema refracts the light, transforming it to the sugar that will sustain it through the coming darkness. And then, within minutes, it's gone. All its needs are met in an ephemeral moment at the end of the day when the sun aligns with the mouth of the cave. It is so little, and yet it is enough. And in thinking about this webinar, in a time that feels difficult, it felt like what I could provide was so little, but I am hoping that it will still be enough. I'm hoping that we can collectively draw inspiration from small places, and the beauty that's all around each of us. I think that this particular imagery, which is at the end of the book, the entire book is filled with beautiful stories of mosses, but also of Robin and her family, of relationships, of stories of loss, stories of environmental degradation and loss, and very personal moments. And I would recommend the entire book, but this last section that is about this moss that thrives in such darkness felt perfectly right for this moment. And so I wanted to share that with you as an example of what might be possible if you pay attention to some of the small things on Earth. And in environmental education, that those small things are often what I remember in thinking about lessons that I've seen. So I am not an environmental educator myself. I'm someone who has studied environmental educators. I don't work with children. I am an environmental educator in the sense of teaching young adults, but I don't work with children. I find great inspiration in the people who do. And my dissertation focused on the people who support teachers in carrying out environmental education in nearby spaces. So this photo is from a school garden where I noticed that what a lot of really young children were most drawn to were the worms that they were able to dig up from the garden beds. Those were a source of wonder, and there's so much possibility in what you could do with worms. When I was teaching at GW, there was a student project called Worms to Wonder, which was supposed to be about using worm bins in classrooms in a school where having a full-sized school garden would have been difficult just in terms of resources, in terms of parent volunteers. That might not have been possible, but they were thinking about worm bins as a much more contained way to explore nature. Shifting a little bit to environmental education a bit more directly, I wanted to highlight this one quote from a book called Ecological Education in Action. It's by Gregory Smith and De La Cruz Williams. It's this book. And I don't know Gregory Smith, but I'm going to be quoting from two books that are co-written, co-authored by them. Dr. De La Cruz Williams was one of the readers for my dissertation, and I was so grateful that she read my dissertation without knowing me at all. They write, "For us, ecological education connotes an emphasis on the inescapable embeddedness of human beings in natural systems, rather than seeing nature as other, a set of phenomena capable of being manipulated like parts of a machine. The practice of ecological education requires viewing human beings as one part of the natural world and human cultures as an outgrowth of interactions between our species and particular places." So this too brings to mind this idea of paying attention to specific places and creating a relationship that's loving with these spaces and places. Um, in terms of seeing the beauty that is around us, seeing the problems as well, but seeing those problems as opportunities to create more beauty and to bring in more nature. Here's another set of ideas that I found inspiring. And this is from a book called Place-Based Education in the Global Age by David Greenwood and Gregory Smith. This book, and this is from the beginning of it. And again, I don't know Gregory, but I do know Dr. Greenwood. He was my introduction to Robin Wall Kimmerer's work during this place-based workshop that featured braiding sweetgrass. And I think I mentioned that in the last webinar. So they say, "In our work as teachers and researchers, we have long been concerned about the division between environmental educators and those who direct their attention to matters of social justice and equity. We are convinced that human welfare will depend on the ability to reconcile these two domains in the coming decades. We suggest that reversing a slide into social and environmental degradation will require heightened awareness of place. Sometimes this awareness leads to understanding and resisting the ideas and forces that allow for the privileging of some people and the oppression of others, human and other than human." And I think that what we need more of is examples of what that looks like. What does it look like to tend to a place in a way that enables students or enables us to create richer, more layered relationships with that place, with each other in those places. And this is a place that I found inspiring that doesn't exist anymore in this way. It's the K Street Farm in Washington, D.C. that was managed by D.C. Greens. And it was a beautiful place on what was an abandoned lot or vacant lot. There was a garden, it was a farm, a garden, a space for education. And there were lots of spaces within that larger space. It was a really inspiring space. They are now recreating a farm in a different part of the city because the land underlying this garden was owned, I think, by an energy utility and will be developed in some way in the future, but isn't right now. So thinking about these places, how they evolve over time, who they inspire, I think there's a lot there, and who has access to such places. This particular farm was served the community around it. At the time, there was a public housing project called Sursum Corda adjacent to this land. There was a school, an elementary school, where a lot of those students went. That school, I think, still exists. The public housing project, as of the last year, or so doesn't any longer exist. It was razed. So change over time, who gets to benefit from beautiful natural spaces, beautiful built spaces, who doesn't, why? Those are some of the questions that I think about when I think about place, our relationship to place, and equity. This is another photo from Washington, D.C., from the Anacostia River, and it's during a boat trip that was led by the Anacostia Watershed Society to explore and understand the river and the animals and plants that gain sustenance from it. And the students on this boat were so excited to see things like turtles and deer on the riverbanks and fish jumping. And it was just very inspiring. So I'm going to pause here to take some questions if people have them. And then also to give us some time to process some of what I've read to you and to think together a little bit. And so we can have some questions now if people want to either talk or write down questions. And if there are any questions,
Naamal,
we could go right.
We had one question, and Anne, you might have noticed who sent this in, but it was one of the things I'm always struggling with is how to welcome more diversity to our students' rural nature center when the overwhelming demographics of our immediate area are very white. We're about 45 minutes from the city, and I'm continually working to figure out more ways to invite a greater diversity of guests and members. We excel at fostering floristic and native species diversities. Humans can prove to be a greater challenge. I'd love to hear some input on this topic from a marketing and communication standpoint.
Yeah, that is difficult. I think that it helps to create relationships with an organization that serves the groups that you're trying to attract to the nature center. So often there are organizations, it depends on where you are, but there might be a chapter of Outdoor Afro, or Green Latinos might be relevant. There might be a much smaller grassroots organization in a nearby city, in some area on tribal lands, some area that's relevant to where you are, that's not too far away. And cultivating that sort of relationship with that organization might be a great first step towards doing that kind of outreach. But then there's also cost. So bringing those students to the nature center, I found, at least with my research in DC, that funding for school buses is often a barrier in getting students out into nature.
And that was from Ed. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed. And then there's, yeah, no writing prompts yet. I was going to talk about, but Paula answered in exactly what I was thinking of. How do we support this might be a question. How do we support these deeper discussions in an organization, connection to place, relationship, and equity? I think, again, by paying attention to it, talking about it, asking people for their ideas and their stories, if it's within an organization, can be incredibly productive. So just doing some reflective writing, storytelling, facilitated discussions can be a good first step, but then also inviting in people who are different in some way. So having guest speakers from an organization maybe that isn't doing exactly the same work that you are, but that if you take the two, or the missions of the two organizations together, you have environment and equity, or environment and diversity, environment and justice together. Those conversations that are about the intersections, I think, can be incredibly powerful. Danielle says, I've been working on how to teach about invasive species in an inclusive way and without such harsh xenophobic language. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that it's fun to draw parallels between things like migratory species and immigration. I think that it can be dangerous to apply the parallel language between invasive species and people who are indigenous to a place versus people who are colonizers or people who are in a place but maybe don't have the right documents to suggest that they belong in that place. It's tricky. It's one of the things that I was thinking about that might be relevant in preparing for this is the idea of, yeah, we're all the same species as humans, definitely. But also the idea that Robin Wall Kimmerer brought up in her other book, Braiding Sweetgrass. She talks about becoming indigenous to place. And I think there's a lot to think through and think with in that concept of how do you begin to belong to a place? How are you from a place? And she talks about naming, giving names to the species, to the surroundings, to the places as one aspect of understanding and belonging. There's a lot there to think about, but I definitely recommend that chapter. There's a lot of discussion about weeds and what is a weed, and about species like dandelions that are not native to the United States, but there's a lot in there as well. What do you mean by reflective writing? By reflective writing, I mean, it's fairly simple. It's just thinking about when you go to a place or when you read something, to connect it back to your own lived experience in some way, to sit down and reflect on it, to think about an idea in relation to your own life, to process something that happened to you, just taking the time and space to write in a way that's personal. That's what I mean by reflective writing. But again, there's many definitions. As an organization, Katie says, as an organization, we strive to remove financial barriers between local students and their visits to our institution. The problem we often encounter is that teachers don't want to be outside. The kids love it, but it seems torturous to the adults. Have you seen this issue before? Yes. And if others want to respond to this in the chat, please do, and to any of the other comments as well. Yeah, often fear is a barrier and the unfamiliar. So that's part of what I'm thinking about in terms of becoming indigenous to place, or developing a relationship with place. And place includes the built world and the natural. But I think that what often keeps teachers from being comfortable teaching outside is that they themselves as children did not develop a close relationship to nature. In my own example, my early childhood was spent outdoors in a garden in Sri Lanka. I spent a lot of time just exploring plants. Much of my middle childhood years, from the time I was 6 till I was about 16, I lived in apartments and didn't have frequent access to the natural world. I was really nervous about hiking. I wasn't nervous about nature and being in nature exactly, but my family didn't go hiking very often. And when I did a semester abroad in Costa Rica in college, I was really nervous that I wouldn't be able to, that I wouldn't be as comfortable in the outdoors as the other students would be. So I think that small engagements with nature that are in a transitional setting between the built world and the wilderness can be helpful. So start in a garden or start inside of the building with plants. Um, it's not a complete answer, but I think that might be part of the issue with adults is the lack of familiarity and comfort and sense of belonging in those natural spaces. Do I think, Paula asks again, do I think that reflective writing is a necessary step as opposed to just thinking? I think it depends on the person. I think reflective writing can help you think in a different way. Sometimes it can be surprising what comes up when you write. Speaking of which, I will have us shift to writing in a minute just to see what comes up. Yeah, I just try it and see, I think, and encourage anyone else who is hesitant to just try it out. Just put a pen or pencil to paper and see what comes up. Stella brings up two naturalists that come from different places that became Indigenous and advocates for the DC, for nature in the DC area. Hi, Stella. It's nice to see you. Danielle mentions that sometimes the nearby place isn't safe to learn outdoors, so choosing another place can connect to a great alternative. A former classmate teaches in urban New Jersey and her place is Costa Rica. Yeah, if you can travel to some place that feels safe to students, whether that's just outside of the city or inside of the classroom or in a courtyard, sometimes when a school is being built, internal courtyard spaces can be a safe way to be outdoors and teach outdoors if you have the luxury of being involved in the design of the school. And then Sally says that, yes, it seems teachers carry their personal narrative that contains place and time outdoors. And we need to encourage students to create their own personal narrative in place. Yeah, writing outdoors is amazing. This is wonderful. Keep writing in the chat because I think we're all learning from each other. I would like us to switch for a minute to do a little bit of writing for 15 minutes, if that works. So I'll keep track of the time. I'll still be here. I really encourage you to use a piece of paper to write in a notebook on paper. And then we'll come back together and share a little bit before we close out. But thank you so much for the discussion. There's always a lot more to say. So we will write until 5:55 and then have a few minutes at the end. Thank you. Actually, I didn't. And write about this topic of, I'll write it in the chat as well. Write about the idea of paying attention to place and whether that can bring up thoughts related to equity, whether it can help you see both problems and possibilities that are inherent in that place, ways in which to make education or conservation or any of the work that you do more equitable in some way. So I'll write that in the chat as well as a prompt, but feel free to take inspiration from anything that we've read or talked about so far. And let's just write. Hi, everyone. I'm going to bring us back together now. Just a couple of minutes early. If you are still writing, feel free to wrap up the writing. I wanted to come back together to just see what came up for people, what people wrote about, if there were any other questions or thoughts that people wanted to share before I hand it back to Anne and Judy to just wrap things up. So I hope that was productive or interesting, or even if it was frustrating, that it got you started. And feel free to unmute, to, I guess, raise your hand to unmute, or to type thoughts in the chat. Write down what you wrote if you would like, or share some of what you wrote. And I think Anne will manage that process. But I wrote a little bit, I went back to the idea of play, the definition of place, Yifu Tuan's definition that I brought up in the beginning, of imbuing space with meaning. And I added to that the goal for me is to imbue space with meaning through persistent attention. And reflective writing is a way to create that sort of persistence and attention, a way to make a place special. Because a building or a park becomes important and special through what we pay. Sorry, I don't know. Okay. Sorry. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But a building or a park or any place becomes special because of the ideas that we put into it, because of the beauty that we notice in it, and what we share with others about what is beautiful or special. And then over time, people develop a sense of belonging. Oh, and then, yeah, Judy mentioned that if you want to share what you wrote, we can also highlight what people wrote on the webinar page. Jaime or Jamie, they write, I wrote a bit about how my class assignment for January is to visit a sit spot every day when possible, and how that has been going so far. This is the second week, and I definitely feel much more connected to the small stream I sit beside every day, where I listen, think, and watch. I might want to incorporate some reflective writing now as I continue. Yeah, you begin to love a place by visiting it often, just like you cultivate a relationship with a person by getting to know them better. I think that's wonderful. And yeah, doing that same sort of thing with students or with anyone that you work with together can be amazing as well. Danielle, do I unmute? Do I see the participants?
I'm going to try to unmute Danielle. She had her hand raised, and let's see if she wants to share.
That sounds great.
I actually lowered my hand because my dogs are being loud, so please forgive me if they are crazy. I wrote a lot because I think about place all the time. I run a nature center, and it's interesting because I grew up in southeastern Kentucky, and I had this wonderful access to nature, and the people that I serve don't often have those things. And there's a whole list of reasons why they may or may not get to be outside, and that definitely hits on the equity piece. But what I find is that everyone connects to nature in their own way. And so sometimes sit spots and reflective writing work for some students. And sometimes hearing the stories of a certain species, maybe what connects them to our wetland in that space. And, we use the same exact place to teach topics, everything from local history to plant life cycles for first graders and water cycles for fourth and sixth graders and etc. But one of the things I see that works really well with adults is telling the stories of our land. So our property was once a Boy Scout camp for Black Scouts because the Boy Scouts were segregated, and it operated until the Civil rights acts passed, and people don't know that that's right there in their community. When we have pictures and we get to connect people to that space in a way that maybe I wouldn't as a white educator who was never a scout. But I love thinking about this, and as someone who cares about nature, how can I make other people care about it? That's one of the things that is important to me. So
Yeah. Thank you, Danielle. That was wonderful. It's what are the stories that people can grab onto and then grow that relationship from that story. And I think that's a great example of where some of the history might be invisible of that place unless you tell that story of what happened in that place, who had access to it in the past, and why that was meaningful or special, and celebrating that. With a lot of the sites around DC, the Native American history of those places isn't very visible to people. And I think that's something that we could really all work on, people who live around here, is making that history a little bit more visible to students and to everyone. I think those sorts of stories make those places feel like home, in some way, to people from different backgrounds. And that's something maybe that I could leave you with, is how can you all make the places where you work feel like home to people? What are the stories? What are the activities? What are the rituals or ceremonies that make that place special, and that make the different groups of people or different individuals feel like they belong? And Danielle, as you were talking, I also thought about how I'm really fond of sitting in a place or writing about a place, but for some people, moving in that place and touching, and the textures are what make people feel connected. There's so much in the chat now. I am really looking forward to reading through all of this, but I know that Judy and Anne have a couple of announcements to wrap things up. I might try to revisit some of what people have written and contact you individually to see if you want to write a blog post or share your writing in some way. But thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Naamal, thank you so much. That was so fantastic. As always, it's just so great to have time to think and reflect. And we really appreciate the time. So thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Anne, but we really appreciate it. And I hope everybody is giving a virtual kind of thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And these comments are fantastic. So Anne, take it away.
I'm just going to leave this slide up here for another second. And Naamal, do you want to put your contact info in the chat for folks?
Yes.
I'm going to just start sharing another screen. Wow, I feel like my blood pressure just drops anytime I get a chance to hear from you, Naamal, and get some time to sit and reflect. So thank you so much. And just wanted to end the webinar today like we do with all of our webinars, and that is just to remind all of you that everyone is going to be getting all of Naamal's slides and the notes from the chat, and I'll be sending that to all of you by the end of the day tomorrow. And as Judy mentioned, we want to open up the EE Pro space, the same page that you went to register for today's webinar. We want to open that up to get additional comments and discussion from all of you. So if you're open to sharing some of the stories that you wrote today, if you want to share that on that page, we're going to open up that page tomorrow morning. So I invite you to do that. And if you liked today's webinar, I invite you to learn more about all of the other wonderful webinars we've been doing. We did 24 last year, and you can check out many of those recordings on our YouTube channel. You can see the synopses from all of them, and also notes and slides from all of our previous webinars, all on EE Pro. And if you really like the webinar series and you want to continue supporting this kind of important work, you can become an NAAE member. And by doing that, you can join a growing global network of dedicated individuals that are just like you, that are seeking this kind of professional development and support and creative thinking. And we've got different levels of membership available to you. Check it out on our website. And I want to end with a final invitation that you can still access our virtual conference from last fall. We had our virtual research symposium and annual conference entirely online last year. And if you register now, you can still access nearly 400 recordings and presentations and plenaries. Those will all be still available until September of this year. So check that out. So much great content. The last thing I want to leave you with is that we are still putting together our plans for webinars for 2021, and we would love to hear from you. We're going to be getting out a survey, a more formal survey to all of you, just to get some of your thoughts on specific topics and ideas that you want to see in this space. We have a number of webinars that are cooking and in the queue coming up for 2021 that we'll be sharing out shortly. And that is all. Happy New Year to all of you. And it was so great to see you all, and hope to see you on another webinar soon. Thanks again, Naamal, and thanks again, Judy, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks
Naamal.
again. That was so good.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Great photo, Anne.
Not mine.